As the one-year anniversary of the Washington Bridge closure approaches, I spoke with Casey Jones, an out-of-state engineer who's been examining the situation for his YouTube channel. Can you explain a little bit of your background and how you came to learn about what's going on in Rhode Island with the Washington Bridge?
Yes, so I've been a geotechnical engineer, which is a specialty within civil engineering, for coming up on nearly 40 years now. I own my own deep foundation testing company. The bulk of the work that we perform is construction phase testing for bridge contractors for drilled shafts and driven pile foundations. So I've been in the bridge business for essentially last 25 years. And so I've got extensive background with working with contractors, working with designers, and I just wanted to broaden my challenges, for lack of a better term, and decided that, I wanted to cover things that I saw in the news in a more technical fashion related to engineering and construction. So back in July 2023, I started posting to my YouTube channel, Casey Jones Professional Engineer, and I follow, I rely on local media investigators to pick up on these stories, and then I do my own research to drill down on what the engineering and construction related issues would be. And this Rhode Island story was really atypical. I mean, it was really shocking that somebody would have to suddenly close a bridge, an important bridge. And early on, I sensed that they were not being accurate with their statements for whatever reason about what led to the closure. And so normally I do one or two videos about a topic and then move on to other things. But as I've said in other places, the Rhode Island DOT is the gift that keeps on giving relative to content creation.
What has stood out to you as you've looked into this issue as an outsider who doesn't live here in Rhode Island looking in about this situation? What makes it so unique?
Well, first you have, many storylines, as it were. I mean, this has had a major impact on the local community and businesses, from what I understand. The way they went about the closure, it took them a few days once they discovered this broken rod to actually shut the bridge down, which was surprising to me. If it was that urgent, which I believe it was, it should have been closed immediately and not let a few days elapse. And then when Director Alviti gave a press conference, I think on December 13th, discussing the bridge closure, he was throwing things out there like, he's told that it was an overloaded truck that caused this damage. And then they bring out photos showing before and after. The before was from the July 2023 inspection that showed apparently that the rod wasn't broken, compared to the December photo that shows that it clearly was December 2023. And I'm looking at, and there's a completely different camera angles. It's like, how can anybody with a straight face put this out here as evidence that the rod wasn't broken in July of 2023? So it's been the lack of transparency, the amount of statements that just don't make sense. And frankly, I think it's been poorly managed, in my opinion, in terms of going after all these people. Most of the people have been involved with the westbound bridge from either design, construction, repair, or inspection standpoint, that they were going to create an environment where people would be extremely reluctant to bid on being involved with the design and construction of the replacement bridge. So they, in my opinion, seem to be getting in their own way. And I work with DOTs all the time, directly and indirectly, and I've never seen this level of just, I think it's mismanagement, quite frankly, and it's just a spectacle. And so I can't help but point out what I see is going on here.
Mm-hmm. And when they made that initial discovery and did shut down the bridge, they were saying for a couple months that they were hoping to repair it and to reopen the bridge within a matter of months. It wasn't until several months after that initial closure that they made the announcement they were going to demolish and build a new bridge. Do you think that was the right way to go about things, or do you think the decision to demolish could have been made sooner?
Yes, I made videos about this where early on I said it was clear to me, based on the information that had been made public to that point, that this bridge, given its age, given its condition, given critical failures like this anchor rod, no doubt had to be replaced, because you don't have just a single important failure like that and not in all likelihood have other major issues. And it looked to me like one of the factors that could have contributed to this broken anchor rod was a high level of corrosion. And you could see that the bridge had been poorly maintained. Drains that should discharge water from the bridge deck were clogged. I understand you salt the roads in the winter, salt the bridges, which is common practice. Salty meltwater is the perfect environment for corroding reinforcing steel, structural steel, and so on. So it just seemed, again, extremely remote that anybody could think that they could rehabilitate that bridge and not just replace it and get on with it.
After the state's first attempt to solicit bids to rebuild the bridge failed, they tried this new two-step process. 4 teams have now submitted their qualifications for consideration, and the top 2 will put together more detailed proposals. Do you think that's normal to have things go about in this way, or what's your experience in these RFP, RFQ processes?
Well, you can have a range of things happen. For example, in a conventional design bid build, the DOT will either in-house or have a consultant do a design, and then the DOT will issue the plans and specifications as well as schedule information for contractors to bid. And there are times where contractors just simply don't bid on the work, or the people that do bid are well above the engineer's estimate or the budget for the project. So that happens. But in this scenario, where they knew they were going to a design build process, and they lead into it with threatening lawsuits, or actually executing lawsuits against many of the previous parties involved with the bridge. And then apparently they won't release the details of the RFI responses when they didn't get any responses back to their RFP. And I'm not sure why that is, but from a management standpoint, it was pretty obvious that they made the mistake of having an unrealistic construction schedule. Even though they were offering incentives, there are also significant penalties for not meeting that accelerated construction schedule. So in my view, they created a situation where it was impossible for contractors to collect the bonus, but most certainly would incur the penalties, along with other considerations here in terms of how they've been handling things. So it wasn't surprising to me in that scenario that they didn't get any response. And I think it's a huge disservice to the people of Rhode Island, given the importance of this bridge. I mean, they expected to have this RFP awarded, or an award relative to that first RFP, in the summer. And here we are almost 6 months later, and they're still in the process of selecting somebody. So it's not good.
Yeah, and they don't actually intend to select the final company until June, about a year after they would have initially awarded it, had things gone properly that first time. So we're waiting to see how that all shakes out. But as there's this lawsuit going on, is it normal for a state to be suing companies that they're then asking to work on other projects?
I haven't seen a DOT that was this litigious. I mean, just in my work experience, as well as just being a consumer of news, across the country. I follow stories worldwide. And, Aetna, as you pointed out, is involved with the demolition. There was another engineering firm that was involved with evaluation of whether the eastbound bridge could withstand the additional traffic that was routed over from the westbound bridge. That company was also named in a lawsuit. I'm sure there's not a huge pool of contractors in that area of Rhode Island that if you start going out and suing the contractors or the engineers, you create an interesting situation. If Aetna Bridge is named as a defendant and they're doing the demo, but then your attorney general comes in and pauses the demo because they need to preserve evidence. I mean, to me, that's an inherent conflict of interest. If you're doing demo and might uncover something that potentially could go against you in a legal action. So it's kind of bizarre, honestly.
Mhm. Is there a conflict there as well when it comes to the rebuilding? We're kind of waiting to see if people will bite this time, if anybody wants to build it under this new RFP. Do you think that they're more likely to be successful in the second go about this?
I think so. I was looking at the questions on the website, and I don't know whether any of the parties that were named in the lawsuit will submit a proposal. It's quite possible, uh, or they could bring in entirely other contractors and other designers. But you can bet one thing's for sure: whoever steps up to submit a proposal will ultimately build in contingencies to deal with Rhode Island DOT and the state of Rhode Island in terms of how they deal with people. You know, I know firsthand when you have an owner or a DOT that's very difficult to do work for, whether they want perfection or they're unreasonable about even making payments in a timely fashion. You know, contractors are in the business of building bridges, and you know, in some cases they say, well, I'm not going to work for this DOT anymore. But also you have people who say, well, I'll work for them, but at a price. You know, I know people in business, engineering consulting, they'll work for problem clients, but they'll charge through the nose to do it. And so just indirectly, I believe that Rhode Island is creating a situation where they're going to pay way more for this bridge than they would have otherwise if they hadn't pursued all this legal action.
And while all of this is taking place, both lanes of traffic, both directions of traffic are driving over the newer eastbound structure over the last couple months. The number one question we get from people in the area is that eastbound bridge safe? And while the DOT says yes, we've gotten some documents, one in April saying that it had become considerably more sensitive since moving both directions of traffic onto that bridge. As you've looked into some of that, what's your assessment of that bridge?
Well, they did have an engineering evaluation, and the Federal Highway signed off on the additional traffic as well as the weight of that concrete Jersey barrier acting as a median between the two directions of traffic. So that evaluation was done. I am curious though, and this is something I'm still investigating, is to what extent that evaluation included information about the most recent inspections for that bridge. I had requested inspection records for the last 10 years, and those inspection reports indicate some things that you wouldn't want to see on a bridge, you know, missing anchor bolts and things of that nature. So I'm not saying that the bridge is unsafe. I'm saying Federal Highways, the state of Rhode Island, and their consultant determined that the eastbound bridge could withstand this additional traffic. But just as you know, as I've been researching this, I am very curious though to what extent that evaluation incorporated the existing condition of the bridge.
Mhm.
So, you know, right now the bridge is rated in fair condition. The westbound bridge was in poor condition for many, many years before they ultimately closed it. So there's lots of bridges throughout the country that are rated as poor or structurally deficient that people use every day. It's not a preferred situation, but essentially if the DOT and their consultants determine that the bridge is safe for traffic, it'll stay open.
When it comes to a bridge being in fair condition, we had gotten some of those inspection reports as well. And this bridge, the eastbound one we're talking about, it opened in 2008. And by 2017, 9 years later, it was in fair condition, no longer in that top good condition. Is that normal less than a decade later?
It seems like a quick change in the rating relative to the number of years, particularly if you take it into the context that that rebuilt bridge that was completed in 2008 was supposed to have a life of 75 years. So, you know, you ask yourself 9 years after construction going on that it's in fair condition, you know, is it going to last another roughly 60 years? I think that's a fair question. I also think it's a fair question to ask the DOT to the extent that there were any deficiencies identified in these previous and even recent inspection reports. What, if anything, have they done to address those deficiencies? And if they haven't addressed them, why? Given the criticality of this bridge. And as you mentioned, they spent nearly $3 million at least on this monitoring system, structural health monitoring system, and weigh in motion system. And from what I understand, the health monitoring system for the bridge is not operational at this point. And they, in their write-up, they use the word, it's become more sensitive, or the term, the bridge has become more sensitive. I don't know if that meant from a structural standpoint or just from a management standpoint that they can't afford to have anything go wrong. I thought that wording was a little confusing, but certainly given the importance and their own rationale for spending nearly $3 million on this system, I don't know why it's taken them so long to get it up and running.
Yeah, as you look forward at this is a year in, but certainly far from over, how long do you think it would be until there's a new bridge up and running?
Well, based on the timeline I know of right now, as you alluded to, summer of 2025 is when they're going to award the contract for design and reconstruction of this bridge. Aetna apparently has been given till the end of 2025 to finish their demolition, because now that includes removing the piers and cutting off the piling, I think 2 feet below the mud line. So there won't be any real work started for the new bridge until early 2026. Now, there's some things that they can do in terms of geotechnical investigation and design work and so on. But as far as actually implementing any construction for the new bridge, you're talking the earliest is early of 2026. And a bridge like this would typically take at least 3 years to construct, in my opinion. So I think you're looking at the existing eastbound bridge having to carry all this additional traffic for probably another 4 years before the westbound bridge has been replaced and open to traffic.
Wow. Are there other things, as you've been following this story, key questions or issues that you're still looking into and you're still curious about?
Yeah, one thing that struck me is that, the governor and Director Alviti have promised a day of reckoning for people who are involved with the incidents that led up to the emergency closure of the westbound bridge. But I'm wondering why there isn't any apparent effort to hold people at the DOT accountable. The attorney Max Wistow, who has since bowed out of the case, and his firm as well, at an early press conference before they named these these people to the lawsuit, indicated that, the DOT staff doesn't have money. So it just seemed like the lawsuits were strictly a money grab, in my opinion. And the state of Rhode Island, and particularly the DOT, had zero interest in identifying root cause issues on their part in terms of management, in terms of oversight that led to the emergency closure of this bridge. And you also have to ask a broader question. If they got caught by surprise that this bridge was in such bad condition that it had to be closed immediately, what does that mean about how accurately they understand the condition for other bridges, including the eastbound bridge?
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.